Thank you so much for that gracious introduction. What a joy to be back here again. And as you have said, I've been coming to CSL ever since my hair was black. Long time ago. And what beautiful music, I must tell you. You know, the 13th century sage Rumi has this wonderful utterance. You might not know that Rumi did very little writing. He would just go into a trance and words would pour out of him and his family and friends would write them down, and the collection of that is Rumi poetry. So he said, what is music? He said, music is the sound of the spheres, and we have been part of this harmony before. And all this music and singing keeps our remembering fresh. This wonderful story of a Rumi, who would every night get together with people and in a circle and do zikr. Zikr means remembrance of God. Singing. Then the whirling dervishes. I don't know if you've seen the whirling dervishes. And in one particular sitting, there was a very conservative Muslim, very, very uptight. And he said, what is all this? Music, singing. And Rumi said, brother, music singing is the sound of the creaking of the doors of paradise. The sound of the creaking of the doors of paradise. What did that conservative cleric say? I hate the sound of creaking. And what did Rumi say? Rumi said, that's because, brother, when you hear the sound of the creaking of the doors of paradise, for you, the doors are closing. My friends, today the topic is connecting, bonding with my higher self. So the first question is, in my mind, in your mind, who am I? You see, we are all drenched in mystery. I love stories. There's a wonderful character in Islamic spiritual literature named the Mullah. Anybody heard of him? He has many names. Totally fictional, and very humorous. So here's a story of the Mullah. He goes as far as China for a transaction, and the banker finally asks, sir, can you prove you are who you say you are? What does the Mullah do? He reaches into his pocket and takes out a pocket mirror. And he keeps staring into it for a long time. And finally says, yep, that's me all right. I prove it, that's me all right. I'm totally satisfied, that is me. Many levels of meaning. Who am I? I am my personality, which the Buddha describes as nothing more than a bundle of conditioned reactions to life's circumstances. Nothing more than a bundle of conditioned reactions to life circumstances. But I'm more than that. I'm also the divine spark. Christ nature, Buddha nature, Elohim nature, Allah nature within me also. But you see, I get stuck at the level of my personality. In the dramas and melodramas of my life, I forget I'm far more than that. Which is why Rumi says, Brother Jamal, remove your masks. Remove your masks, because your real face is so beautiful if only you knew. So ask yourself, do I really know who I am? Okay, that was the first question. The second question is, why am I here on planet Earth? Why am I stuck in a hypnotic trance of just continuing robotically? Why am I living a life of manageable depression? So, what is the reason I'm here? And that is what I'm going to talk about today. One reason is all the traditions say we are here to evolve into the fullness of our being, becoming more Christ-like, Buddha-like, Elohim-like. And we're doing it whether we know it or not. Prophet Muhammad said, you're doing it Every moment, because you have free choices. You're making a decision every moment in your life, every hour, every day, every week, every month. And by those choices you're making, because you have free will, you're either getting closer to your soul, ennobling your soul, enriching your soul, or you're moving away from it, diminishing your soul. Which is why Rumi said, Brother Jamal, this is why you are here. One of the main reasons. And his utterance is, marry your soul, that wedding is the way. Marry your soul, that wedding is the way. But besides this work of becoming authentic, genuine, removing my mask, connecting to my higher self, I'm also here to be of service to God's creation. Again, Rumi, be a lamp, a lifeboat, or a ladder to God's creation. Some of you have heard of Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore. He's from India, the first Asian to win the Nobel Prize in literature. You might know the poetry. He says, I slept and dreamt, life was joy. I awoke and found life was service. I served and lo, behold, service was joy. So other reason is I'm here for service. The third one, the traditions say, I'm here for building community, relationships with you and God's creation. Okay, back to evolving into the fullness of my being. As I said, I'm in a hypnotic trance. It doesn't quite resonate for me unless something happens in my life, as is invariable. It could be something very joyous. I might be watching a sunset and suddenly something splashes in my heart. Oh my God, something opens up in me about the beauty of this universe. Rumi says, if a drop of the wine of vision could rinse your eyes, everywhere you looked, you would weep with wonder. But because we're unmindful, because we human beings are unmindful, sadly, it's a tragedy that happens in our life that wakes us up. Death of parents, of loved ones. Then suddenly, deeper questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What's going on? I love the poetry of Hafiz. Something missing in my heart tonight has made my eyes so soft, my voice so tender, my need for God absolutely clear. So there comes a time in your life, in my life, where I really want to go deeper. Again, Rumi, sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment at this incredible mystery we're drenched in. Who am I really? Why am I here? Where do I go after I die? You see, when some difficult things happen in our lives, the mystics say we move from a knowledge of the tongue to a knowledge of the heart. Again, Rumi has a wonderful utterance. He says, Brother Jamal, on your deathbed, your greatest regret might be, I've lived a life. But I've never really tasted the water of my own essence. I never really got to know the real me. I got stuck in the dramas and melodramas of my personality. I never got to know and connect with and bond with and enjoy my higher self, which is also within me. What did the Buddha say? What were his last words as he was dying? He said, famously, be a lamp unto yourself. Be a lamp into yourself. Work out your salvation with diligence. That's one of the main reasons you are here. Be a lamp unto yourself. Work out your salvation with diligence. This wonderful Islamic mystical saying, where Allah tells you, Allah tells me, Allah tells humanity, Allah says, beloved one, between me and you, there are no veils. Between me and you, there are no veils, but between you and me, there are 10,000 veils. And the most important one in Islamic spirituality, in Sufism, is this wonderful revelation that comes to the Prophet Muhammad in a dream where Allah says, tell this to humanity. Allah says, I was a secret treasure and I long to be known. And so I created you and the worlds, visible and invisible. Spirit, divinity, mystery is saying, I was a secret treasure and I long to be known. And so I created you and the worlds, visible and invisible. So you see, in each one of us, the mystics say, there is a longing. There is a longing. Once we become still, we realize there's a longing that nothing satisfies. What is it I want? Like Rabia. Anybody heard of Rabia? She's an 8th, 9th century or 7th, 8th, 9th century female Islamic sage. Very beautiful. You should Google her, Rabia. She uttered, there is a disease in my breast no doctor can cure. There is a disease in my breast no doctor can cure. Only union with that friend can cure it. Only union with that friend with a capital F can cure it. What is it I want? Rumi. There is a kiss we want. There is a kiss we want all our lives. A touch of spirit on the body. There is a kiss we want all our lives. A touch of spirit on the body. You see, we want to connect with that which Hindus describe as indescribable, unutterable, inconceivable. With divinity, with spirit, with mystery. Where is spirit? Where is divinity? Where is mystery? Where is God? Where is goddess? The holy books say, if I look in the Quran, as I'm a Muslim, it says, it is outside of you, Zahir. It is also inside of you. Where? Again, revelation by God to the Prophet Muhammad. Tell humanity, I cannot be contained in the space of the earth. I cannot be contained in the space of the heavens, but I can be contained in the space of the pure, loving heart of my devotee. Allah, the God of all of humanity, says, beloved one, I cannot be contained in the space of the earth. I cannot be contained in the space of the heavens, but I can be contained in the space of the pure, loving heart. Which is why in Sufism, the heart is very important. You will see a Sufi always touching the heart, thank you, and telling the heart, I love you, again and again and again. So, back to this question. How do I evolve into the fullness of my being? Remember that verse I just said, or that insight where Allah says, between me and you, God says, there is no veil, but between you and me, there are 10,000 veils. These are the veils of the ego we have to go through. It's okay. We need our ego. But our work is to go beyond the ego. And how do you do that? A Bedouin asked the Prophet Muhammad, how do you do that? How do you go beyond your ego? Prophet Muhammad said something which is also in all the traditions. He said, know thyself, and you shall know thy sustainer. Then he said, die before you die. Die to all that is false within you before you die a physical death. Then you're getting closer and closer and closer to who you really are, your divine spark. Whatever you call that belief system, to your Christ nature, Buddha nature, Elohim nature, Allah nature, it doesn't matter. We have to do what is called the inner inconvenient work. Something we want to avoid all the time. I'd rather get a big degree and tell you how to do it rather than do it. There's a wonderful mystic from South Asia, Mirza Ghalib, who says, Brother Jamal, your face was dirty, your face was unclean. Your face was unclean, but you were obsessed with cleaning and cleaning, polishing and polishing the mirror. Your face was unclean, but you were obsessed with polishing and polishing the mirror. Okay, so what is it we have to do? So the most important step in connecting with the higher self is to do what Sufis call compassionate self-witnessing at all times. The key words are compassionate. Brother Jamal, be gentle with yourself. You have no idea, who you are, why you are here. I forget if I told that mullah story. I might have told it. The mullah is in the tavern, drinking. It's all allegorical. He's drunk, and he stumbles out of the tavern, like I'm falling down, you see. And he's just walking aimlessly. A policeman accosts him and says, "Sir, who are you? Where did you come from? Where are you going?" And the mullah says, "Sir, if I knew the answer to all those questions, I'd be home already." No idea. So, compassionate self-witness to discover who you really are, to move beyond the I, me, and from some strange, mysterious reason God has put that ego inside us. We need that to survive. But to connect with the real me, I have to use the ego to go beyond the ego through compassionate self-witnessing. In Hinduism, they say, along the same lines, we are like two birds on the branch of a tree. We're like two birds on the branch of a tree. One bird is pecking away at the fruit on the tree. The fruit could be sweet, the fruit could be bitter. That's life. But I'm also the other bird on the same branch, simply, compassionately witnessing. Witnessing. So you're being asked, I'm being asked, turn on the light of awareness, compassionate awareness. And you'll be amazed, just by shining the light of compassionate awareness on yourself, your shadows will diminish. So in Islamic spirituality, in Sufism, that is why the mullah has become very popular, that fictional character. Through his humorous stories, he's always talking about his own foibles of the ego. We become aware in a very gentle, loving way of our own ego, and that gentle, compassionate awareness diminishes it. So for example, let me first introduce the mullah. Who is the mullah? What is the most famous story of the mullah? He's younger than I am, middle-aged, has a turban, has a beard, always on a donkey. The typical example of the mullah is he is on his donkey, rushing through the marketplace. Friends and family say, Mullah, stop, I want to talk to you. What does the mullah say? I'm so sorry, I'm so busy, can't you see? What are you so busy with? He says, I'm looking for my donkey. And the caption is, aren't we all? And we forget the greatest joy of life is to stop searching for your donkey. It's already there. But have relationships with your family, with your friends. That is what will bring you happiness. Okay, that was the introduction of the mullah. Okay, now about the real topic, before the time moves on too fast, about shining the light of compassionate awareness on ourselves. Prophet Muhammad was asked, what is the biggest problem humanity has? What is the reason for the downfall of humanity? You know, in our country, we see the same thing now. What is the biggest problem? He said the biggest problem is arrogance, pride. So, how can I become aware of that in myself? Well, the story of the mullah. On a moonlit night, the mullah is on his constitutional walk. He happens to pass by a well. He happens to look inside the well, and he is shocked. Why is he shocked? Oh my God, the moon has fallen into the well. Sister moon, fear not, fear not. He rushes home, gets a rope, finds a hook, he flings it, it catches something, he heaves and pulls, and he falls on his back and sees the moon restored to its proper domain. And he says, thank God I came along. So as a cleric, what is the biggest problem I have with pride? The biggest pride problem I might have or you might have is, if you really, I believe in all religions being beautiful, I might say, but if you really studied my religion, it is a little bit better than yours. The biggest problem a cleric might have, what is called holier than thou attitude. So just be with that. In my life, where am I being a little bit arrogant, a little bit proud? Oops, I usually always put my thing out in case I forget what I was supposed to say. So just be with that. Okay, second one. You were saying I've worked with the Interfaith Amigos. We've traveled all over the country. We've even gone overseas. Our favorite story of the mullah is about getting stuck in patterns of behavior. Blaming some here, them, bad luck, forgetting to look at how I have contributed to that problem. For example, at one time I was very involved in, do you remember Occupation Seattle? Railing against those big banks and large corporations, and I used to stand up and speak to large crowds about don't, support all these large mega companies and banks. And suddenly I realized, but Brother Jamal, where do you bank? Same big bank I'm criticizing. So here's a story. The mullah goes to work, opens his lunch pail box. What does he find? A cheese sandwich. Second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, there's always a lousy cheese sandwich. 10th day, I'm getting sick and tired of this lousy cheese sandwich. His puzzled co-workers say, Mullah, tell your wife, be gentle with her to make you a different kind of sandwich. I'm not married. Who makes them? I do. Story of our lives. Stuck in patterns of behavior. So ask yourself, in my life, in what areas am I stuck in patterns of behavior where I habitually blame others, bad luck, universe, etc., etc.? Just be with that for a few moments. Okay, moving on. Excuses. When I was growing up, my father, who was a very gentle human being, he would say, son, your excuses are so creative. If only you channel them in the right direction, you'd be enlightened like this. So the story is, someone knocks on the mullah's door. Can I borrow your donkey? It's done in that part of the world. The mullah doesn't want to give the donkey. He lies. He makes up an excuse. Oh, brother, if you come just 5 minutes ago, I just a few minutes ago lent it to a neighbor. Unfortunately, just at that time, the donkey in the stable begins to bray. But I hear your donkey. The mullah is caught. What does he do? Who will you believe, me or the donkey? The story goes on. But what are the excuses I am making, you are making, to avoid the real work in our lives? Just be with that for a few seconds. Okay, truth-telling. Do I speak the truth? Sages have said, psychiatrists have said, psychologists have said in modern times, we don't speak the truth, most of us. We speak truths of convenience. Exaggerate, deny, avoid. So this is a very important question. Do I speak the truth? Story. The mullah is having a big party, but he doesn't have the large pot. He needs a huge pot. He knows the neighbor down the street has a huge pot. Knock, knock, knock. Housewife appears. Can I please borrow your large pot, big party? She's reluctant, but rules of hospitality. She says, okay, take my large pot. Next day, the mullah comes to give the large pot back, but he has another small pot. She says, what is this small pot? She says, madam, didn't you know? Your pot was pregnant. It gave birth. And she says, oh, yes, I kind of suspected that. Thank you so much for taking care of the delivery. So she's very happy. Next month, Again, he has a big party, knocks on the door, can I borrow a large pot? Of course, gladly gives a large pot. But the day after, the week after, the month after, there is no mullah. So she knocks on his door. Where's my large pot? Madam, didn't you know? Your pot was pregnant. I'm so sorry to tell you, it died. The little pot died in childbirth. The housewife says, how can a pot be pregnant? Madam, you believed it the first time. Truth of convenience. Can I go a little bit longer? Yeah. Okay. Because I was told in the second one, you're going to be a little bit more free with time. But I don't want to overdo it. By the way, not to waste time, but if you study Taoism, anybody studied Taoism? Tao Te Ching, wonderful. They say the biggest problem human beings have, that includes me really, particularly, the biggest problem human beings have is they just don't know when to stop. They overdo it. In Zen Buddhism, they say you draw a snake, but you overdo it. You also draw little legs onto it. Okay, I don't want to overdo it, so I'll gently bring it, say just a few more things. So also, what are some qualities of the heart? Like patience. Cultivate that to go beyond the ego. Rumi has this wonderful verse which I love very much. Rumi says, you see, patience particularly in times of difficulty, that is when it really matters. That's how you grow it. So Rumi says, through this metaphor, the patience shown by the rose to the thorn is what keeps it fragrant. The patience shown by the moon to the dark night is what keeps it radiant. So can I be patient? Can I be gracious, generous? I love that wonderful Sufi saying, the character of a wali means friend of God, is based on nothing more than graciousness and generosity. The story I said earlier this morning is a Sufi story of God coming down to earth in the guise of a beggar and comes to two people and begs for money. God in the guise of a beggar. One person gives 1 copper coin, a measly copper coin. The other one gives 5 or 10 copper coins. And what this beggar does is transmutes those copper coins into gold and returns them to the beggars. Allah can only offer you in great generosity whatever you offer to God's creation. Can I be generous? Okay, so now the question is, what does this practice involve? That was the first one. I'll talk about 2 more. I always carry within me a piece of paper. This has been my training since childhood. My parents, my teachers told me, whenever you find that you encountered an ego trait within you, like say I got overly angry, irritated, write it down. Of course, restrain yourself, but write it down. If a divine quality flowed through you, I was gracious, also write that down. So every evening what I do is I shine the light of compassionate awareness on my ego traits with gratitude. Oh my God, I became aware of that. And you know what that does? That light, as I shine on my ego traits that I've written down, it diminishes it, just as the sun diminishes the shadows. And on the divine qualities, I find that it's like the plants. When the sun shines on it, it flourishes. So this is called compassionate self-witnessing, to really become aware at every single moment of your ego traits and your divine qualities and shine the light of compassionate awareness with gratitude. Okay, very quickly, 2 other ones, second one is my favorite. It's about realizing that Allah is outside of you and Allah is also inside of you in the heart. Telling the heart, I love you, or you are loved. Knowing that, as Rumi says, love is the cause and essence of everything. The poet Hafiz, 14th century, says, Jamal, whenever you meet someone, anybody that you meet, you're saying to yourself, please love me, please love me, please love me. Because you want to be loved. Please love me. Please love me. And Hafiz says, of course, you're saying this silently. Otherwise, somebody would call the cops. So I find the most powerful exercise in my life, and I also do therapy, and I deal with difficult situations, heroin addict, incest, murder. The practice that really works the best, eventually, if I can really create the environment for that person, is to focus on the heart and just tell the heart with feeling, with sincerity, I love you. I really love you. Or you are loved. You are loved again and again and again and again and again, no matter how awkward it feels. I have people who tell me, no, it just feels, it feels awkward. I just cannot do it. But they come back sometimes after a year or two and say, I tried it finally, and that is what really got me off the heroin addiction. Telling my heart, I love you, or you are loved. Okay, last thing I want to tell you is establish a relationship with yourself. There's a very famous Harvard study, 85 years old by now, and a Brigham Young University study, but studied this question of what are the factors that creates happiness in life? Yoga, lifestyle, walking. What was number one? Do you know? Self-love. But also having relationships in life that are reliable. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then Brigham Young University, they did the same study and they were shocked. Same result. The number one factor for happiness was having relationships. And number two was shocking also. It was, how do you interact with those who you meet casually in life? The teller in the bank, the post person, the clerk at the store. The way you interact with them not only affects your happiness, it affects the longevity of your life. Therefore, the Sufis say, they're wonderful practices. Why don't you have the most wonderful relationship with yourself? So what I wanted to tell you was, besides telling your heart, I love you, give yourself a wonderful name. Like, I call myself Brother Jamal. What would you call yourself that when you talk to yourself, build this relationship with yourself, evokes compassion, evokes love? My sweet child, my beloved one, my darling. Just shout me one or two. What would you say to yourself?
Fearless butterfly. Fearless butterfly.
Beautiful, beautiful. One more. Impeccable, lovable. Please use it. Please use it. You'll be surprised. When I get angry in life, I have this voice saying, but Brother Jamal, please restrain yourself. We'll take care of this. And I restrain myself. When I'm sad, I have this, but Brother Jamal, it's okay. Let's go out to have cafe mocha or go to a movie. And you'll find every relationship outside of yourself is a reflection of the relationship you have with yourself. So tell the heart, I love you, you are loved. And I say, but Brother Jamal, talk to yourself. Brother Jamal, let's do this, let's do that. Have that relationship. Okay, so the musicians are here. I don't want to overdo it too much. I'll just end with this last quotation by Rumi. Please take it to heart. Rumi says, please know this. It comes from his heart. He never writes anything. He says, you are a ruby in the midst of granite. You are a ruby in the midst of granite. How long will you continue to deceive us? For we can see the look in your eyes. So please return to the root of the root of the root of your real self. Let's do that. Thank you, my friends. Thank you. And thank you for your patience. Thank you so much. Thank you.